This is a map of who owns the land in Israel, or at least who has owned it for the past couple thousand years. We're going to start all the way back in ancient times, around 1200 BCE. This is roughly when, according to the Bible, the Israelites settled in the land of Canaan, which is today Israel and Palestine. And when they conquer Canaan, they kick those people out, and then they take the land and divide it up among the people of Israel. They didn't really have an official real estate agency. Instead, the land was tribally allotted and managed through family inheritance systems. Alexander the Great conquered the region in 332 BCE, and after he died, his empire was divided among his friends at the famous funeral party of Babylon. In 19 BCE, they built a statue of Caesar in the Second Temple in Jerusalem, which outraged the Jews. They controlled the land for the next several hundred years. During the Ottoman period, most of the land was owned by absentee landlords who lived far away. The actual work on the land was done by the peasants, who were called fellahin in Arabic. And these landlords basically had a feudal-like system where the fellahin would give the landlords a portion of their crops in exchange for being able to farm the land. At the end of the war, Israel had gained even more land, including the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. And that's led to a whole host of other issues. For example, in 1978, Israel passed a law that says that only Jews can own land in Israel. And the Palestinians say this law violates international law. Anyway, the question of who owns the land in Israel is complicated. Both Israelis and Palestinians can point to historical claims that they believe justify their ownership of the land. And neither side seems willing to back down. In the West Bank, they again used the absentees property law to confiscate the land of Palestinians who fled or were expelled from the area during the war. Then in recent decades, Israeli settlements have taken place all across the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. And a lot of these settlements were built on land that was confiscated from Palestinians. So since 1967, a lot of Palestinians have lived under Israeli military occupation. And the question of who owns the land has become increasingly contentious. Because Israel says they own the land because they own the land. Because they own the land because it is rightfully theirs, and that Israel's occupation is illegal under international law. The Ottomans didn't really do much to improve the land. They also didn't really keep good records of land ownership. It was very possible that no one really knew who technically owned the land. If you liked it, please hit the like button and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Later, between the 11th and 13th centuries, the Crusaders came in and established a small Crusader state in northern Israel. So they were now ruling the region under a mandate from the League of Nations. At the end of the war, Israel had defeated the Arabs and gained even more land than they originally claimed. They now controlled all of this territory, and soon after, the Israelis passed a law called the absentees property law, which allowed them to confiscate the property of any non-Jewish person who left the country during the war. Over 700,000 Palestinians fled or were expelled from their homes during the war, and most of them never returned. And so under this law, the Israelis were able to claim all that land. At first, the British continued the Ottoman system of land management. But over time, they began improving the system. They registered land titles and made sure that land records were accurate. They also encouraged Jewish immigration to the land and supported organizations like the Jewish National Fund, which would buy land from absentee landlords and Arab peasants and establish Jewish villages. And so during this period, the demographics of the region changed dramatically. By 1948, there were more Jews than Arabs living in the land. But most of the land was still under the control of various Arab dynasties. And then in 66 CE, the Jews revolted against the Romans, but they lost and got kicked out of the land. This period culminated in the destruction of the Second Temple and the expulsion of the Jews from the land. The Romans even banned Jews from ever returning to the land again. They sold all the land to non-Jewish people. This is also why today in Israel, you don't find any Jews whose family has lived in the land for 2,000 years. All the Jewish families who have lived in the land for 2,000 years actually left during this period. So if you look back at the map, you can see that the Romans sold all the land to non-Jewish people. There may have been some Jews who remained in the land, but they probably didn't own any land. The region came under the control of Ptolemy I, who was a general of Alexander's army. And soon after, Ptolemy decided to move the capital of his empire from Memphis to Alexandria. And so now, Alexandria becomes the center of the Greek Empire in this region. Meanwhile, the Jews continue living in the land of Israel, but now they re-subjects of the Greek Empire, and they have to pay taxes and stuff to the Greeks. This leads us to the next period called the Hellenistic period, which lasted until 63 BCE. During this time, Seleucids and the Ptolemies constantly fought over control of the region. But overall, the Greeks had pretty strict policies against the Jews. For example, in 200 BCE, the Seleucids tried to force the Jews to abandon their laws and customs and adopt Greek culture instead. And in response, the Jews rebelled. And after they won, the Seleucids left the region alone for a while. But eventually, in 63 BCE, Pompey came in and conquered the region for Rome. And so now, the Jews become subjects of the Roman Empire. Now, the exact timeline of the conquest of Canaan is heavily debated by historians. We're going to see the kingdoms of Israel and Judah pop up here. These kingdoms were united under kings like David and Solomon, but eventually around 930 BCE, the northern kingdom broke away and became known as Israel. Meanwhile, the southern kingdom kept the name Judah. The two kingdoms were ruled by rival families, and they were constantly fighting each other, getting conquered by other people, and just having a rough time. Eventually, in 722 BCE, the Assyrians came in and conquered the northern kingdom of Israel and deported many of its inhabitants. Then in 586 BCE, the Babylonians came in and conquered the southern kingdom of Judah, destroying the first temple and deporting many of its people to Babylon. But basically, according to the Bible, the Israelites came out of Egypt after the Exodus, fought some battles, and kicked out the Canaanites, after which they settled in the land and started taking the land and giving it to the people of Israel. So there you go. God promised Abraham that his descendants would possess the land of Canaan forever, and now they finally have it. Meanwhile, on the ground, there are these various tribes that already live here. So let's move forward to about 1000 BCE. Okay, so this is what we call the Babylonian exile. Now the people of Judah who remained in the land paid tribute to the Babylonians, while the Babylonians ruled over them. However, around 539 BC, the Persians conquered the Babylonians, and now the Jews are under the rule of the Persians. A bit later, the Persians allowed the Jews to return to the land of Israel and rebuild their communities. So they came back and re-established themselves. But a lot of the land was still under the control of the foreigners. Okay, so here we see the rise of the Greek Empire. And the Romans also weren't too fond of the Jews. But eventually the Muslim Arab armies conquered the region in the 7th century CE. And now the Arabs became the dominant power in the region. In 1517, the Ottomans conquered the region and they ruled it until World War I, when the British came into the region during World War I. They put down some roots and stayed in the region after the war ended. Okay, so in 1948, Israel declared independence and immediately went to war with surrounding Arab nations. And then in 1967, Israel fought another war, this time against Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. Since the 1970s, Israel has made a lot of land in the West Bank and East Jerusalem into state land. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video.